you go.
Good evening and welcome to the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting.
Wait, sir, there's no audio.
Oh, okay.
Okay, check. Will you do a count, Mr. Gritchfield? You do a count, do a test, 1, 2, 3?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Test, test, test.
All right.
Okay. Good evening and welcome to the Town of Cary Planning and Zoning Board meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight. I now call this meeting to order. All board members, staff, and applicants are participating in Cary's council chambers. Tonight, we actually starting a new term for the Planning and Zoning Board, and we have one new member. I would like to welcome our new board member, Sean McAndrew. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you.
Our board clerk, Julie Mitchell, will now take roll call for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Crutchfield. The following board members are not able to join us this evening: Don Hamilton and Jeff Moncrief. For the record, I will verbally state the following present: Sean McAndrew, Mike Roselli, Jessica McClure, John Sorrell, Stephen Crutchfield, Mary Jo Hill, Andy Coe, and Chris Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you. The Cary Community Plan will continue to be the guiding document for this board. Our role is to function as citizen advisors to the town council, who will make the final decision on all rezoning activity. Our citizens' opinions are based on the Cary Community Plan document and will continue to be a very important role in advising our town leaders. While this is a public meeting, please be aware it is not a public hearing. There is no opportunity for the public to speak during this meeting. If you have comments about any of these cases, we encourage you to reach out to the staff case manager or the applicant by email or phone. You may reach out to our board members also through email. You may also contact the council directly through email or during the public speaks out portion of any regularly scheduled town council meeting. These meetings may be streamed live on the Town of Cary website and will be posted to YouTube within a few days following this meeting. All past planning and zoning board meetings are available to view on YouTube. First item tonight is the adoption of tonight's agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Would someone like to second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The next item is approval of our last regular meeting minutes. I believe we did not meet last month, so it would take us back to August. Is there a motion to approve the August 22 meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. Would someone like to second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our first case on the agenda is 21 REZ 17 Destin Phase 3. Aaron Puckett, Senior Planning Manager, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff and the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, and good evening, Board. This is a request to apply initial Cary zoning to approximately 32 acres located on the north side of Ludershop Road at its intersection with Thompson Road. The site is an assemblage of 2 parcels in Chatham County, just under a mile from the Wake County line. It is adjacent to Destin Phases 1 and 2 to the north and is otherwise surrounded by vacant parcels and large lot residential properties. Luter Shop Road is identified as an undivided two-lane thoroughfare on Cary's future roadway widths map. There is a future street side trail along the property's frontage on Luter Shop Road per the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan. The trail is required to be constructed with the proposed development. The site is currently zoned Chatham County R1, and the applicant proposes a Cary zoning of R12 conditional use, which is consistent with the Destin subdivision to the north, which was rezoned in 2016 via case 15 REZ 24. The applicant has also offered 3 zoning conditions, including limiting the use to detached dwellings and neighborhood recreation, limiting the maximum density to 40 dwellings, which is approximately 1.3 units per acre, and providing a minimum lot size of 17,500 square feet. An analysis of the request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds that policies in the Live and Shape chapters apply most directly. The proposed zoning and annexation into Cary limits would provide some additional housing within Cary. The relatively low density and 0.4 acre lot size are consistent with the Destin subdivision to the north, and therefore would provide a reasonable transition between that neighborhood and the larger lots in the surrounding area. The site is also within the Chatham-Cary Joint Land Use Planning area in the low-density residential subdistrict. This area recommends densities not to exceed 2 units per acre and generally encourages a downward transition in density as development moves west. The proposed density of about 1.3 units per acre is consistent with this plan recommendation. A virtual neighborhood meeting was initially held in December of last year, and after that time, a second parcel was added to the assemblage, and therefore a second meeting was required. Approximately 12 members of the public participated in the first meeting and 6 in the second. Questions and concerns included questions about the proposed density and lot size, concerns about stormwater drainage, questions about buffers, and concerns about street lights and school capacity in the area. After the neighborhood meeting, several emails were exchanged with 2 citizens who had follow-up questions about stormwater issues and general questions and concerns regarding development in Chatham County. A public hearing was held in July, and there were no public speakers or comments. Council asked about the total number of units in Destin to date. Phases 1 and 2, which are the existing phases, were approved with 50 units through the rezoning, although only 40 lots were ultimately developed. Council also raised concerns about potential children in the development and the distance to Chatham County schools from this site. Staff have confirmed with Chatham County Schools that there are not plans to build a school on the east side of Jordan Lake at this time, so students would attend schools on the west side of the lake, all of which currently have adequate capacity. And there have been no changes since the public hearing. Staff's preliminary recommendation is for consistency with the plan. We found that the request supports the Live chapter policy to provide more housing and the Shape chapter policy regarding transitions between land uses. The proposed density is also consistent with the recommendation of the Chatham-Cary Joint Land Use Plan for low-density residential areas. This concludes my presentation. The applicant's representative, Glenda Topp, is here to speak to the request, and following her comments, I'm available for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Board. My name is Glenda Topp with Glenda S. Topp and Associates, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Russ Boss, with Destin. Ms. Puckett did an excellent job going over all the details, and I'm just going to go over a few of the points that were made. The request is to rezone approximately 31.67 acres from R1 in Chatham County to R12 conditional use in Cary. The only permitted uses are detached residential and neighborhood recreation. A maximum of 40 dwelling units are recommended for approval with a lot size of 17,500. Destin 3 is a continuation of the Destin that's already under construction. The lot size and density is similar. It was also pointed out that the plan or the property is located in the joint Cary-Chatham County plan, which calls for low density, which this complies with. The proposed lot size buffers streetscapes and density of 1.3 units per acre, provides an excellent transition between the existing land uses and maintains the existing neighborhood character. Rezoning proposed to continue a development pattern that's established by the existing Destin subdivision to the north, which has a density of 1.4 units per acre. Again, the joint land use plan that this piece of property is located within does call for low-density residential, and it does comply. As staff pointed out, there was no one who spoke or no comments were addressed at the public hearing at council. Staff has listed the policies within the Cary Community Plan that we comply with. And in summary, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the Imagine Cary, and we ask for the board's recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Now is the time for members of the board to ask questions of staff and applicant, and we'll start with you, Chris, if that's okay, if you have any questions.
My only question was about the road improvements along Luter Shop. I noticed there's a vacant parcel that's not part of the tract that being developed. What's the plan for the frontage along that out parcel?
So currently, because that parcel is not included, we could not require the road improvements there, so there could potentially be a gap. In fact, there probably will be a gap until some point in the future if that property owner decided to sell or develop the property.
Okay. That's all I had.
So, Andy,
I don't have any questions. A very, very good presentation. Thank you.
Mary Jo?
I don't know if this refers to that gap, but I noticed that there was mention of underground utilities in most areas for Cary, but depending on the size of the frontage, that may not be possible. Is this the piece that's causing that disruption?
That's correct. So I believe you're referring to the power line piece in the staff report. So there is a provision where we typically can require those utilities to be undergrounded along a frontage if there's more than 1,000 feet. Technically, there is more than 1,000 feet of linear frontage here, but because there's that gap, it's not continuous. So I think that will be explored more at time of development plan, whether Duke would allow the undergrounding to include that gap. We just don't have that certainty at this time in the process.
Understood. Okay, thank you. That's the only question I had.
John?
No questions.
Jessica?
No questions.
Mike?
No questions.
Sean?
No questions.
I just have a general question. The land that's on the other side of that Luter Road, is that town of Cary? Or is that, who owns that? Is that Wake County?
Are you speaking about what's shown in white here where the
Yes,
Thompson Road
yes.
label is?
Yep.
So currently that's in Chatham County. There is an active rezoning case that has been submitted for that property for them to annex and rezone into the town of Cary. It has not yet been to public hearing. So assuming that request moves forward, it will be coming to you all probably sometime in the next 6 months.
Gotcha. And then how do you run utilities over there? I mean, this neighborhood will be on town of Cary utilities, right?
Right, so they would be extending utilities. So currently utilities are extended to the parcel that you see north of what's outlined in the yellow highlight. That's the existing Destin where the northernmost R12CU label is.
Yep.
So that site already has Cary utilities. This next phase of Destin would have to continue those utilities further down. And similar with this site across the street that's in Chatham, if it were to have the rezoning and annexation approved, it would continue to extend Cary utilities to that site. So we're fairly close to the Wake County property line and to Cary limits now. In fact, that R8CU that you see on the eastern side of this map, that's actually Cary primary corporate limits. Destin is sort of a satellite that's slightly separated, but it's close enough that utilities are extended out that way.
Okay, I thought that was the case, but I just wasn't sure.
It's hard to tell from this inset map for some.
And then the part that's to the far right, the R8CU, that's Chatham County also, all over there?
It is in Chatham County, but
Okay.
it is also within Cary's corporate limits.
Okay, it gets very confusing up in
It does,
that area.
absolutely.
Question.
And then my last question is the way that the current Destin with the new Destin, will they be seamlessly connected? I mean, there's not going to be, would there be something between them, or how will that look?
So they are contiguous, and you can kind of see from this map, I may have a better one on a previous slide. Let me go back out to a larger map, just because this one is somewhat hard to see. I don't know if that makes it any better. There's actually a right-of-way that comes down and stubs to the northern boundary of this property, so that would be a direct continuation of that site. That would be required to be continued. So in that way, this would sort of be just a continuation of that Destin neighborhood. And it would be the same lot sizes and all of that, so it will, for all intents and purposes, look very similar. They'll be extending the street side trail that phases 1 and 2 started along Luter Shop Road, those kinds of things.
Okay, and then just to add on to the previous question, the gutters and all that will be there except for that one little section, unfortunately.
That is my understanding, yes. So they would be doing Cary road improvements except for that sort of little intervening notch
Yep.
there.
Okay, interesting. All right. Any other questions from the board at this time on this case? No? Okay, then we'll close the questions. Would someone like to make a motion for 21 REZ 17 Destin Phase 3 rezoning? I think the motions are on the screen now.
I'll move.
Okay, thank you.
I move that the board find case number 21 REZ 17 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you. Would someone like to second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Mary Jo, since you made any comments?
Only that it seems it's clearly consistent with with the ongoing development that it's adjacent to, and it just seems like it makes sense that those same the same rules basically apply to this one that is now coming along. And since they're right next to each other, there would be consistency between all of the layout and the size of the acreage. So I find it easy to approve.
Perfect. Thank you. Andy, any other comments?
No, I agree with her comments. It is consistent with the Cary plan and is, to me, pretty straightforward.
Perfect. Chris, any comments?
No further comments.
John?
No comments. Seems very straightforward.
Jessica?
Agree.
Mike, any comments?
No comments.
Sean?
No comments.
All right, perfect. All right, having said that, all comments are out on the table. We'll now call a vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next case is 22 REZ 12 Brookstone Community Association. Aaron Puckett, Senior Planning Manager, will share the staff's presentation. Following the presentation, the applicant will share their remarks. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff and the applicant. You may proceed.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.
This next case is a request to annex and apply initial Cary zoning to approximately 1.04 acres located along both the north and south side of Louis Drive, east of its intersection with NC 55 highway. The site consists of one unaddressed parcel, which runs along both the north and south side of Louis Drive, adjacent to the intersection with NC 55. The parcel was purchased by the developer of Brookstone, the subdivision to the east of this site, in the 1990s to provide the required access to NC 55, but it was not annexed into Cary at that time. The landscape strips were later turned over to the Brookstone Community Association. During consideration of previous rezoning cases in the area, including the 20 REZ 08 rezoning, which was approved in November 2021 for a mixed residential neighborhood, Residents of Brookstone expressed concerns about the maintenance of this westernmost segment of Louis Drive, which is currently maintained by NCDOT. In order for Cary to take over maintenance of the street segment, it would first need to be annexed into town limits, and Cary is unable to annex right-of-way except as intervening area when property on either side is brought into our limits. If annexed, the segment would be eligible for a future street swap with NCDOT, and in order to annex the site, a rezoning to apply initial Cary zoning is also required. Louis Drive is designated as a collector street on Cary's transportation plan with a future 2-lane cross-section and sidewalk on both sides. The Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Master Plan does not propose any parks or greenways in the immediate vicinity. The site is currently in Wake County and is zoned Highway District, or HD. And the applicant proposes an initial Cary zoning of resource recreation. As the request is for a general use zoning district, there are no zoning conditions associated with this request. A preliminary analysis of the request against the Imagine Cary Community Plan finds the policies in the Shape, Serve, and Move chapters apply most directly. A zoning of resource recreation, along with the shallow depth and small area of the site, would limit the use of the property. It is unlikely the property could be developed for anything other than its current use as landscaped open space, which would help to maintain transitions to properties to the north and south, as well as maintain the attractive appearance along this portion of Louis Drive. Preserving these landscape strips in RR zoning could also address SERV policies related to the preservation of open space and tree canopy. As mentioned earlier, the rezoning and annexation of the property into Cary's limits would make the adjoining right-of-way eligible for a future street swap with NCDOT, which would help provide consistency and maintenance of the whole of Louis Drive, thus tangentially addressing the MOVE policy to ensure a well-maintained system. This segment of Louis Drive is one of a list of several streets under consideration for a potential swap with NCDOT that would come before council at a future date, likely in early 2023. The site is designated traditional neighborhood on the Future Growth Framework map, and this designation supports the provision of common open space associated with residential development. A virtual neighborhood meeting was held in August. No citizens participated in the meeting, and staff has not received any calls or emails since that meeting. Council held a public hearing for this request in September, and once again, there were no public hearing speakers or comments. Council members noted that even if the right-of-way is under Cary maintenance in the future, it would not solve citizen concerns related to traffic, only those related to maintenance. And one member noted that, or asked rather, if there were any benefits to Cary of taking over this road segment. Staff noted that in addition to providing consistency to citizens in regards to maintenance, acquisition of this segment could actually help facilitate our future infrastructure projects, which could include a forthcoming utility project we know will be happening in this area. And there have been no changes since the public hearing. Staff's preliminary recommendation is for consistency with the plan. We found the request supports shape policies regarding transitions and attractive appearance of development. And the rezoning is tied to an annexation, which would be the first step towards future acquisition and maintenance of this street segment, which could support MOVE policies. And the proposed RR zoning would also help retain the site in landscaped open space, which could support SERV policies. This concludes my presentation, and the applicant's representative, Randy Herman, is here to provide the applicant's comments, after which I'm available once again for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, members of the board. Randy Herman from the law firm of B.A. Folk. I'm here representing Brookstone Community Association. As Aaron stated, the basic impetus for this request is that the community association owns these two buffer parcels, which are owned by the Brookstone Community Association, although they're not surrounded by lots within Brookstone. It's kind of an anomalous situation that's been in there since the 90s. as part of the original development of Brookstone. While we were dealing with the rezoning for that parcel that's labeled on here as TRCU, there were concerns that were raised by members of the association about issues on Louis Drive. Again, all of Louis Drive to the east of here is all within the town of Cary, but this one little section up at the front at 55 is DOT maintained because it's not within the town limits. So we started looking around for options in order to address that, and basically what we came up with is the idea to have these buffer parcels annexed into the town so that then the right-of-way also could be annexed into the town to facilitate eventually the town taking over maintenance of this part of Louis Drive, so it would be consistent between both parts of the road. As stated, the proposed zoning is recreational. It's a landscape buffer now. It's intended to remain a landscape buffer. There really isn't anything else that can be done with it. And that is basically what it will be going forward. So hopefully this is even though it's an unusual request, hopefully it's pretty straightforward for the board, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. All right, now is the time for the board members to ask questions of staff and applicant. And we will start on the other end. Sean, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time.
Mike?
Aaron, just to make sure everyone's clear, this has nothing to do with right-of-way dedication, and Brookstone Community Association will remain responsible for maintaining the landscaping and the buffer.
That's absolutely correct on both points.
Just annexation. Thank you.
Jessica?
I think I just missed the end of this. Do we have a potential road for the swap with DOT in mind?
It is on a list of streets to swap, and my understanding from my most recent conversation with transportation is they would love to give this to us or swap this to us. They tend to maintain the bigger thoroughfares and streets, and the smaller neighborhood streets they prefer for Cary to maintain.
Sure. Okay, thank you. That was it.
John?
With the property that's involved being part of the community, but being, outside of the community, is there an intent to try to convey that property so that the landscape buffers are not maintained by the association, or is this just solely the cleanup of the roadway?
I'll let the applicant respond to that.
Thanks.
Good question.
Yeah, I can answer it. I mean, the community association's been maintaining it for about 30 years. We
Right.
plan to continue doing it. It is kind of anomalous, but there's no plan to give up maintenance of it.
Yeah. The main reason I ask is you get those spike strips along right away sometimes, and didn't know if that was getting cleaned up as well.
No, it just is what it is. It's just part of the strange development of the way this part of the community was developed.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Mary Jo, questions?
I have no questions.
I do have a general question, and it's more for maybe my education. I haven't heard this term street swap before. Can you give me a little street swap 101 lesson?
I'll try. Our transportation staff had to give me that
Oh, no.
lesson too. So,
Okay, do your best.
I hope I'm prepared.
I'm all
for
ears.
that. My understanding is there's been ongoing discussions. NCDOT sort of has these lists with municipalities, including Cary, of segments that could potentially make good street swaps in the future. This is one, to my understanding, because this came up with the previous rezoning from a couple years ago, that this segment of Louis, because the rest of Louis is all within Cary,
Right.
that they would love to have us take over at some point. But because it's not even within our corporate limits, we don't even have the option today. My understanding is, so annexation is really the first step. Once that happens, it goes through on a street swap list, a potential street swap list that gets approved by our council. We have transportation and facility staff who are actually sort of doing the background work for that now, is my understanding, with the intent of potentially bringing that to council as early as January or February next year. So that would sort of be step two, would to be have our council approve that list of streets that we could potentially take over from NCDOT. Then it does take Cary action and NCDOT action to actually make the swap. But my understanding is after that list is approved, that could happen really at any time. We have periodic meetings with NCDOT. And then from there, my understanding is sort of the last step is there's this PAL bill map that happens every summer where depending on the mileage of roads that each locality in North Carolina maintains, depending on both their population and the road mileage that we maintain, we get a certain amount of funding. So then it could potentially lead to that as well, a little more funding for road maintenance and that type of thing.
Okay.
So I hope that helps. That's about as much as I know on the subject.
It helps for sure. Thank you so much. No further questions. Thank you.
I guess I have another educational question. For the south side, I noticed that there is already existing sidewalk along the north side of Louis Drive, but there's not along this south section, but there is sidewalk further east, I guess next to that TRDU
Yes.
parcel. Is there plan to be another sidewalk, and if so, does that cause any conflict with the trees that are out there that we're planning to preserve with this?
I was wondering if someone might ask this question. So it's an excellent question, and you're exactly right. We did get sidewalk on the north side with the development of that RMF CU property that you see on this map. Because the property to the south is in Wake County, and because these landscape strips won't develop, we don't have the ability right at this moment to get sidewalk the way we normally do, which is concurrent with development of the property. That being said, our transportation staff has reached out to the Brookstone HOA via Mr. Herman to actually start conversations about if this site were to come into Cary, would they be willing to grant basically a sidewalk easement across it? They've expressed to our transportation staff in the past that they're very interested in getting that sidewalk network completed, especially with a school on the other side of NC 55. So my understanding is that's not set in stone. It's not a condition of this rezoning, obviously, but that is something that's actively in discussion, is getting a way to actually get that sidewalk easement with the understanding that it would then have to be funded, but that sidewalks next to schools are typically very high up on that priority list for getting funding. So we're optimistic that that would be easy to fund. To the second part of your question, that's the part that is a little more nuanced, and this is something that staff have started discussing internally. There are some existing trees there that we would love to see preserved. There's also some topo challenges with that southern strip where it's got sort of this big slope going up towards with where you see the HD property is kind of the high side. So it is possible that putting a sidewalk in there could have impacts to the existing vegetation. It sounds like Cary Utilities and Transportation staff, if that happened, would probably be willing to replant, and I think they would be willing to work with us to minimize the impacts. But at the end of the day, if it was a trade-off between some trees that aren't really a lot of mature trees in there, right, where the sidewalk would need to go anyway, and the sidewalk, we're probably going to take the sidewalk and then hope we can get some replantings in there.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, perfect. I have to have a general question, transportation related. Assuming this gets approved by the town council and Cary gets more involved in this, are there any major improvements that the state is going to make to this intersection that you're aware of? It's a super dangerous, crowded intersection.
Yes. So I am not aware of anything that NCDOT is currently planning there. I did discuss that intersection with our transportation staff ahead of this meeting. They have said, once a sidewalk kind of goes in there, there will be a need for another pedestrian crossing. Right now, there is one on the north side that was put in by that Cornerstone development, the RMFCU development. There's not one on the south side. And my understanding is if that HD parcel were ever to develop, that we could probably work with them to get that put in place. If it doesn't, it's really going to come down to timing. So I believe if that parcel doesn't develop, we would be looking to potentially have a town project that would put that crossing in. But we don't know the timing of that. There's no funding for that currently. But we would be looking to, once a sidewalk is there, we want a way to get people across the street. My understanding is at a minimum, we would look for an opportunity to get that north-south ped crossing with ped heads in on the eastern side of the intersection. So at least people could walk the sidewalk, cross to the north, and then continue to the school. So that's just from the pedestrian side. I am not aware of any vehicular improvements that are planned at that intersection as of this time.
Okay. I mean, to me, it's very hard for me to imagine people even walking across Highway 55, to the school over there, but it must happen, but that's a tough one to deal with.
Yeah, and there is a pedestrian crossing, and now, across the north side of that, going east to west, and I don't have any data with me on, how well used that is, or if there have been any incidents, but something we could look into further.
Okay, that's it. Any other comments from the board? Nope. Okay, having said that, would someone like to make a motion for 22 REZ 12 Brookstone Community Association rezoning? The motions are on the screen.
Sure. I move that the board find case number 22 REZ 12 is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you. Would someone like to second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Comments, John?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those rare cases where the cleanup of something that is a legacy item, it benefits everybody, but very rarely gets the momentum to actually get cleaned up. So really excited to see some progress, and sounds like it's moving in a great direction, of course, consistent with good planning practices to try to get this consistent all the way through. So glad to see it.
Thanks. Mike, comments?
No comments.
Okay. Sean, any comments?
No comments.
Jessica?
No comments.
Mary Jo?
None. I agree.
Andy?
No comments, thank you.
Chris?
No comments.
Perfect. Having all the comments on the table, we'll now move forward with a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item that's all of our rezoning. The next item is Act 26, Land Development Ordinance Amendments, which are of a technical and minor nature. Rob Wilson, Land Development and Special Projects Manager, will share the staff's presentation. There will not be an applicant speaking on this case. All board members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the staff following the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. As you may recall from your March 28th meeting, staff has made some changes regarding the review and discussion of Act amendments. Now our Act amendments either focus solely on legally required and/or minor technical updates, or they focus on more major amendments associated with a discrete topic, such as Act 24's flood ordinance and environmental amendments that you saw at your meeting on August 22nd. As the chair has identified, the amendments this evening fall into the technical and minor category. This classification means that they make clarifications and process improvements without changing town policy or regulatory intent. Act 26 includes items in the following three areas: amendments to the town code to remove outdated or defunct processes, LDO clarifications for a handful of infrastructure and transportation-related items, and minor updates to Cary's Community Appearance Manual. I'll walk you through each of these items and provide a brief overview of the proposed updates. Regarding the town code, we have two areas with updates. First is the elimination of local beer and wine sales licensing from our ordinances. Our finance department performed a cost-benefit analysis of requiring local licenses for ABC permit holders and found the administrative cost of requiring these local permits outweighed the benefits. Thus, in 2021, at Cary's request, state legislation was enacted permitting Cary to no longer require an ABC permit holder to also obtain a separate local license. Accordingly, Cary stopped issuing the licenses and collecting the associated fees in 2021. This update would bring our code in line with current practices. Second are amendments to update Hillcrest Cemetery ordinances. These amendments clarify that there are no new cemetery plots remaining in Hillcrest Cemetery and also update the procedure private owners should follow when transferring an existing cemetery plot to another private party. The proposed land development ordinance amendments clarify existing policies and procedures. The first clarification includes more direct language to clarify that a developer must complete construction and maintain all public infrastructure until it is accepted by the town, and that failure to do so is a violation of the land development ordinance. The remaining LDO clarifications relate to transportation. Developers who build certain qualifying thoroughfare improvements are eligible for cost sharing with the town. All recent cases have utilized a credit that is applied to the project's transportation development fees. The proposed ordinance amendment aligns with recent practice in providing that fee credits will be the only option for cost sharing going forward. We also propose to clarify that a traffic impact analysis is required when a proposed zoning generates 100 or more peak hour trips prior to applying any reduction for trips internal to a mixed-use development. This clarification prevents a developer from using any potential trip reductions to avoid the traffic impact analysis requirement. We're also proposing updates regarding new residential lots in our public street network. We propose a clarification that new residential lots must front on a publicly maintained right-of-way in accordance with the requirements of the Cary Standard Specifications and Details Manual, and the minimum required 20 feet of frontage must be achieved along the length of the street right-of-way, not along the stub end of the road. The proposed updates also clarify that when new residential lots are created on a public street or alley, they must connect to a thoroughfare or collector roadway via a public street, and that there cannot be any intervening private streets. Finally, staff proposes the following revisions to the Cary Community Appearance Manual: consolidating and reorganizing 4 individual documents to create one seamless document, updating references and links to external documents and removing links to obsolete items, updating text and illustrations to increase clarity and better align with the land development ordinance, updating submittal requirements that reflect Cary's current electronic development review process, and updating graphic design and formatting to unify the document and enhance readability. The Town Council public hearing on these proposed amendments was held on September 8th, and no speakers came forward. The Town Council had no questions or comments regarding the amendments. Staff has made no changes to the proposed amendments since the public hearing. So how do these act amendments relate to the Imagine Cary Community Plan? Implementation of the community plan vision requires legally sound and clear ordinances. The Act 26 technical amendments clarify and improve our regulatory processes, keeping us on strong legal footing as we implement the plan. Therefore, staff finds the Act 26 amendments to be consistent with the intent of the plan and recommends approval. This concludes staff's presentation. Our team would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Now is the time for board members to ask any questions of the staff. And we'll start down with Chris. Any questions?
Thanks for the presentation. No questions.
No questions either.
Mary Jo?
No questions.
John?
No questions.
Jessica?
Wow, this might be the weeds, and I can talk to Priyatham after if it is. But for the TIA, for not using internal capture to reduce your number of trips, you can still use that in the analysis. It's just whether you trigger that threshold without them.
Right.
Okay.
That would be part of the analysis rather than allowing you to avoid doing the analysis.
Yep, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, you're going to have to say that one more time. You guys were doing your, you're doing your traffic thing, so help me out. Give me a little bit more explanation on that.
I'll let you ask your question again, and then I'll give the answer again.
Okay. For the TIA, you cannot use a reduction in trips on site to circumvent the threshold, but you can use that reduction in trips as part of the analysis.
That's correct.
Okay.
Do you need me to offer additional explanation?
I do, please.
All right. So the question has to do with the trip reduction. Are they getting credit for that as part of the analysis that goes with the zoning? And the answer is yes. But they can't use the trip reduction to get out of having to do the analysis for the zoning.
Ah, okay. That wasn't very good, thank you.
We pulled it off together, right?
Mike, any question?
Yeah, I have one question, Rob. So the code updates are written by staff, and then they were recommended for approval by staff.
That's correct.
Can you describe a little bit of the process of maybe having a third party look at the recommendations? Because planning board and certainly town council don't have a background in engineering and land development ordinance technicalities.
So we don't have an external consultant that reviews the proposed act amendments, but what we do have is our whole team. We have a staff member who runs a process, a multi-departmental process that includes experts from across the organization, including our legal team. And they keep a running list of important items that, as we look to continue to keep Cary great, things that we should be paying attention to so that we keep our ordinances up to snuff. We're getting the best outcomes from processes, applications, et cetera. So what I can tell you is that we have a very multidisciplinary team working on the recommendations that we bring to you and to the council. And we have found that historically that's worked well, that we know our ordinances and our code the best. Often takes a lot of explanation to explain things, some of the nuances to an external consultant. We found that our internal process seems to have worked quite well since the LDO was originally adopted in the early 2000s.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sean, any question?
No questions at this time.
All right.
All right, any other questions, comments? Okay, having said, gone through the discussion, no further questions. Would someone like to make a motion for Act 26 Land Development Ordinance Amendments?
I move that the board find Act 26 amendments to the Town Code and Land Development Ordinance to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans for the reasons set forth in the staff report, presentation, and discussion by the Planning and Zoning Board.
Thank you. Would someone second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Any comments?
No comments.
Any comments?
Yes, sir.
Chris? Nope. Mary Jo?
I think it's refreshing to have a forward look at cleaning up things, decluttering, so to speak, and consolidating things where it makes sense and getting rid of things that don't make sense and staying legal. I'm all about that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
John?
Well said, no comments.
Jessica?
No comments.
Sean?
No comments.
With the motion on the table approved and seconded, we now take a vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Rob. Carries
Thank you, Rob.
unanimously. We actually do have new business this evening, and the first item of new business is we need to appoint a new vice chair. The vice chair will support here when I'm unavailable. This individual can start meetings, facilitate discussion of agenda items, and bring forward a conclusion of each discussion. You can nominate someone, you can nominate yourself. Both are acceptable. Would someone like to?
I'd like to nominate John Sorrell.
Very good.
I was going to do the same to you.
Too late. She beat you. But you still can nominate her. That is totally permissible if you wish to do so. Any other formal nominations?
I'll speak up to say I would be happy to be vice chair.
Thank you. Any others? How do I take a vote on that? I know how I would do it, but you tell me the right way to do it.
Well, technically, Mary Jo made a motion, so you would handle that one. And depending upon how that one plays out, you could handle Mr. Roselli's subsequent. I think it was a motion, right, Mike? Or was it just an offer?
It was a semi-motion.
So technically, there's only one motion on the table right now.
So we have to vote on the first motion.
Well, it's the only motion right now.
It is the only motion. Well, you can only have one motion at a time
That's up to you on how you want to run it, but
because it's very different.
traditionally, yeah, you do one and then subsequent.
Because you would have to vote against it if you wanted the other individual. Is that correct?
That's the idea, yes, sir.
Okay, then we'll do one motion at a time. And the first motion is for John Sorrell. And if you vote aye, then you would be supporting him being chair. If you vote nay, then you would not be. And depending on if we have a majority, we would entertain the second motion.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Wow, okay, good. I'm glad I got that out.
Doing it.
Is this for just a year? or
1
is it
year.
Okay.
1 year, correct? Okay, okay.
And you can theoretically change this. You have the prerogative to actually entertain motions subsequent to this within the 1 year period to change vice chair if you so chose. But that doesn't happen very often, but it can.
Okay, but I just want to make sure we do the proper format. Okay, then, let me just repeat what we said. We're going to have the first motion is for John to be the vice chair. And call for a vote. If you vote aye, that means you support him in that role. And if it is a majority, then that'll be the conclusion. And if not, we'll take a second vote.
Yes.
On another motion that can be put forward.
Correct.
If so chosen. And do I vote? Do I have a vote?
You are allowed to. Yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. Okay, in that case, we will now call a vote on the motion.
Do you need a second?
Do I need a second on that? I don't think so on this.
I don't believe so.
I don't,
This
okay,
one-
I didn't think so,
internal.
but thank you for saying that. So we will call a vote now on the motion that's on the table. And all those in favor on this one, I want you to say aye and raise your hand. So go ahead. I vote aye.
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 You
You can vote for yourself?
You can vote for yourself.
Well, thank you.
Hey,
Based on the vote that we just took, it was unanimous that we will support the motion on the table. Congratulations, you're the new vice chair.
And we got somebody in the wings for
And thank you for
next
your
year.
help.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item is to really discuss, I'm not going to read through this. Hopefully you guys saw this, but it's the 22-23 work plan. And it basically is, I don't think it's really changed that much from last year, but it basically outlines the role of the board. And we do vote on this, correct? Okay. So has everyone, are there any questions about the work plan? We can discuss it amongst ourselves. If there's anything that you had a question about, we can talk about it at this point, or if there's anything that people want to put forward that would be a change to it, we can discuss that as well. So I'm just going to throw this out to everyone. Are there any comments or questions on the proposed work plan? I'll give you a minute. Okay, looks like
Just
everybody's.
seems like a pretty straightforward statement of what we typically address each year in the normal course of business.
Perfect. Having said that, we do need to formally approve this, so would someone make a motion to approve the planning and zoning work plan? And I don't believe there's any text for this. You just need to put a motion forward that we all agree with the work plan, and we'll vote on it. So
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
For the board to approve the planning and zoning work plan for 2022, 2023.
would someone second, please?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor of adopting the work plan, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The last item is our annual report, and again, I'm not going to read through it. It is summarizes really all the cases that we heard in the last session. We do not have to take a vote on this. This is just to let you see that it's out there. and just to see if there are any questions or comments on it. Any questions or comments on the annual report? I'll give you a minute on that.
I have one comment.
Please.
Looking through the summary of cases and looking at the results that were extremely consistent.
Yes, we are.
Voting across the board, I just wanted to say that that is very likely a factor in the fact that staff does such a great job putting together the staff reports to help
Yes.
explain to us exactly why staff recommended the recommendations that they made.
Any other comments?
Totally agree. Makes our job a lot easier when we hear all the facts presented in a clear way.
The one comment I'll make, and thank you for saying what you did, Mike, is very important. You know, our views on this board, you know, we're just citizens. Now, there are some people on this board that have some really awesome expertise that we get to hear from, but I agree with you, the staff does an awesome job, and by the time it gets to us, there's been all kinds of conversations and look-backs and meetings. But having said that, I don't want anyone to ever feel that you need to vote for something because of that. You know, the town council wants your opinions. You know, back in years ago, we used to actually have people come in here and we did testimony and all that, and we don't do that anymore, and thank goodness. It was a great decision. We shouldn't have been doing it. But it's really important for you guys to give your opinions. So I just don't want anyone to ever feel any pressure that you need to vote for something just because the staff says that they think is consistent. You don't have to. Okay, having said that, any other comments on this? We are at the end of our formal meeting, and if there's not anything else, we'll now close the meeting, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.